Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to update a guide that I put out several leagues ago to making a Fractured Fossil map base. I wanted to cover why you might do this, how you do it in the current league, which is the Ritual League. So this video is being posted in March of 2021. And if there are slight modifications, I'll try to put a note to that effect in the comments and description below. If the information just becomes completely out of date, then I'll scrap the video. I also won't be including any gameplay footage because with the game's performance during the Ritual League, recording during a 100% delirious map is just impossible, at least for my PC. So, a high-level overview. There's a number of rare mapping consumables that are unsustainable in normal gameplay. Delirium orbs, 35 quality map upgrade benches from Betrayal, the very, very best sextant rolls, and things like that. Fractured fossil farming is all about legitimately duplicating those consumables by using fractured fossils. So you can create one map that has all of these silly stacking effects on it, and then just spend one fractured fossil per map to run it. Now, fractured fossils are not cheap, so this is a high investment mapping strategy. Every map that you open using this strategy is going to cost you something of the order 2.5 to 3 exalted orbs at the time I'm recording this video, and that can be higher in some league economies as well. So you need to be making certain that you are actually recovering that cost. That doesn't mean you're going to recover three pure exalted orbs every single map that you open. But what it means is that the loot that you get needs to be meaningfully more than that investment over the medium term. And yes, it will be. So, an example of a fractured map base, and this is an off-meta choice of tileset. So Foundry Map is one of the new maps that was added. I just really like the look of the tileset. But this is an example of a fractured fossil map base in the current league economy. So there's a few things about it. Firstly, it is an Elder-influenced map. So it has that implicit area is influenced by the Elder. Secondly, you'll notice that it is a fractured item and that it has slaying enemies close together has a 13% chance to attract monsters from beyond. This is a fractured mod, which means that if I hit this with a Chaos Orb, that mod will stay. Importantly, if I make a fractured fossil copy of it, which I've done several of, then both versions will have that, both the original modifiable version and also the duplicated version that's created by the fractured fossil. Next, it has a number of permanent changes, so 35% quality, does not consume sextant uses as an enchant, and 5 delirium reward layers, all of which are breach items. So players in the area are 100% delirious. 100% delirious adds several effects to the map. Firstly, it gives monsters massive damage reduction, something of the order 90% reduction to the damage that they suffer. So they're much tankier than normal. Secondly, it causes monsters to deal 30% more damage to you. So it's like you've got a massive decrease to your hit points. Thirdly, there'll be additional delirium packs everywhere. And fourth, all significant monsters will have new delirium abilities. So it does make the map a lot harder than normal, and that's why it needs to have such high rewards in order to be worthwhile doing at all. So that's a little bit of the concept of what you're trying to make here. Now, if you feel like spending about 10 exalts to set up a map like that, and then 2 exalts a map is out of reach at the moment, but you want to get a bit of an experience of what delirious mapping is like on a lower budget, what I suggest you do is head over to Lex Ejoris and allocate the node Pathological. This is something that you'll be able to do as soon as you've done the first Maven's Challenge in the area, and maps in the area have a 10% chance to have layers of Delirium. So that means that they'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 of these Delirium mods. Sometimes they'll have 5, it is pretty rare. And then you will want to run maps in Lex Ejoris whilst using Sextants to increase the number of monsters there, rusted scarabs to add more monsters to the zone, and at least a polished cartographer's scarab. The purpose of the cartographer's scarab is to act as a multiplier to the number of maps that you're getting there, which means that Pathological will proc more often, giving you more delirious map returns. You still won't be able to sustain delirium mapping that way, but you will get a lot more value out of each of your, you get a lot more experience of Delirium content whilst doing it that way. So that's the low budget alternative, I guess, to fractured fossil mapping. So the first decision point that you're going to face is, do I want to run low tier or high tier fractured maps? So high tier maps have better rewards. That's a general rule in Path of Exile, but it's not as much better as people tend to think. And low tier maps can make up for this by being easier, which means that you're less likely to suffer character deaths in there and lose portals, or potentially even lose the entire map if you die a couple of times. And also, low tier maps, you can run gear that is aimed at increasing the amount of items that drop. So magic find gear with increased item quantity stats on it. Now, those increased item quantity stats only apply to the loot that drops from monsters killed. It doesn't apply to the Delirium reward layers, but it's still a pretty significant effect on the amount of loot that you'll get in the map. And one of the most popular mapping strategies in this league has been running tower maps 100% delirious at tier 2. Or is it tier 1? It's the lowest tier that that the tower map is available. And I have a feeling that it's tier 2. But yeah, there it is. It's a tier 2 map over in Glenac Cans. That's been one of the most popular mapping strategies this league, and many a player has farmed a headhunter or more than a headhunter by doing that. So it's very, very viable. So the sorts of rewards that are from Delirium that are available in high tier maps that aren't available in low tier maps are Purified Breachstones, Gilded Scarabs, high item level bases, high item, and particularly high item level energy shield gear. There are shenanigans that you need to make in order to get item level 86 gear to drop, but if you do mess around with those temporary watchstones, and that is one strategy that some people do with delirious fractured fossil mapping, running all 3 of the Cirrus watchstones that add one tier to the zone. If you do that, you will absolutely swim in the highest item level energy shield gear, and that stuff sells, especially in bulk to crafters. You will also get the other things you'll get in high tier maps only: high level incubators, red tier blighted maps, and some divination cards are tile set locked. So for instance, the divination card for the Soul Ripper unique flask is locked to the Vaal Temple. You're not going to get that if you're running a tier 2 tower map. So if you want to farm any of those rewards, you must run high tier maps. But you'll notice that I didn't mention currency there at all. Exalted orbs are just as likely to drop in a tier 2 map as they are to drop in a tier 16. So for that reason, all of the pure currency rewards are completely agnostic of the level of the map. Another factor that's important is that higher tier maps can be Elder or Shaper influenced, and this adds additional packs of monsters to the zone. Zana sells these maps sometimes, and if you tell her to initiate one of her map missions, she will reset her shop. I do believe that you need 120% Atlas bonus, so that's the first of these 2 numbers. So you see here I've got 157 of 164. I do believe that you need that to be 120 or higher in order for Zana to sell those maps. They're available as tier 11 and up maps, and she'll sell them at varying prices. Also, these Shaper and Elder influence maps do sometimes drop from Maven invitations. So this Maven Crucible here, that dropped this Ghastly Roost peer map that you see here, which could be used as the starting point to make a new Fractured Fossil base if I wanted one. So, if you go low tier, use Currency, Harbinger, Prophecy, or Divination card Delirium orbs. And out of those, I would suggest Currency is the best choice. If you go high tier, you can use anything, but I do believe that Scarabs are the correct choice, with Breach rewards second best at the current state of the Ritual League economy. But this is always in flux. In some past leagues, it's been Blight rewards that have been the best. So yeah, that information can change, and that's going to come down to both the Trade League economy and also just what other people are doing and flooding the market with. So if there's a bunch of people flooding the market with Scarabs, Scarabs aren't going to be worth anything. The second decision point is the tile set. So we're talking about the tier first, but then there's a question of which tile set you want to go with. The first factor that makes this decision for you is that divination cards are mostly linked to tile set, but monster count is an even bigger factor. The The Tower map is extremely popular this league as a fracture base because it's got one excellent divination card in the Nurse, a solid one in the Wretched, and a lot of monsters. Next there's a question of map layout. Maze map is terrible, Canyon map is solid. Most maps are in between these extremes. And so for instance, if we take Foundry as an example, Foundry is basically a donut shape. You run around the outside, at one point you fight the boss. It's very similar in a lot of ways to, I think it's not the Crimson Temple, it might be the Desecrated Temple. Whichever one of those is sort of a big square area. Foundry is very similar to that, and so it's an easy layout to navigate. Next, there's the dangers that are posed by the map boss and the enemies. Terrace is an example of a really scary map, with one of the game's harder bosses in Yugal, and also with porcupines everywhere. On the flip side, a map like Beach is very forgiving, doesn't usually have very terrifying monsters, and the map boss is quite straightforward mechanically. Fourth, and probably the most important factor, is the Atlas region. It's my opinion that the specific Atlas passives in Veldo's Rest, specifically Diplomatic Escort, make it the single best choice for your Fractured Fossil mapping, but this is not by any means the only option that's available. Play to the strengths of your map's chosen rewards here. Again, Tower is extremely popular here because you can get the Beyond nodes and the Incursion nodes to amp up monster count. Finally, there's just the look of the map. You're going to be spending a lot of time farming this map with grey Delirium mist over it, so this is both the least important factor and the most important at the same time. Remember that if you're having fun while you're playing, you'll play more efficiently than if you're sort of sitting around in your hideout going, oh, do I have to do another one of those maps? No, you don't, and you won't. If you're not enjoying it, then don't bother with it, and look of the map can contribute to that. And honestly, that was the reason I went with Foundry here, rather than a meta choice. It's because the Foundry map just looks like it's such an amazing tile set. The third decision point is which mod you want to shoot for as your locked mod. So you see here that I have Slaying Monsters close together has a 13% chance to attract monsters from beyond. Now there are 3 objective best mods, all of which are prefixes. There is Antagonists, 20 to 30% increased rare monsters, and rare monsters have a Nemesis mod. This, with a roll of 28% or better, is an outstanding mod. The second one is Val. Now this is an unusual mod in that it is Bloodstained Fossil exclusive, at least in normal play. There's a couple other ways you can get them, but it's mostly from Bloodstained Fossils, and it will always roll when you use a Bloodstained Fossil on a map. Bloodstained Fossils are expensive at the moment. They've gone up to 75 chaos at the time I'm recording this video, and so they're not really that worth trying for. But at the time that I was making my Foundry, I did try for it because they were only 16 chaos at that time. What this Val map does, 20% quantity of items, 10% pack size, so these are just much higher than any other mods. Area has Val monster packs, and items can drop corrupted. And when an item drops corrupted, if it's an armor or if it's a chest piece or a two-handed weapon, it has a reasonable chance of being a 6-link, and 6-links vendor for divines. So basically you wind up getting a few divine orbs out of doing Bloodstained Fossil mapping as well. And yeah, the third choice is Beyond, as you've seen on my map. So you want one of these mods fractured onto your item using Harvest Crafting. You can target one in particular, or just do what I did and accept the first one that you get. Now the Val mod is more valuable when divine orbs are expensive, and I would suggest that you shoot for it if and only if Bloodstained Fossils are worth less than 4 divine orbs at the time. That's sometimes the case, sometimes not the case. It just depends on the specifics of a given trade league economy. So let's go through the steps of creating a map like this Ancient Refuge Foundry map. So first up, you need to source a map base. Trade for your desired tile set and tier, and also trade for one that has the influence you want. You'll notice I've gone with Elder Influence here. Elder Influence is better than Shaper Influence. The reason for that, they both have about the same amount of monsters that they add to a map, but with the Shaper one, there's a considerable delay on some of those monsters spawning, whereas with an Elder map, they spawn much more quickly. This is important because a lot of the strategies that are used for clearing Delirium maps abuse freeze proliferation and also corpse explosion proliferation. And what happens is that often the shaper packs will not spawn until after the proliferations have finished, and so that can be very, very dangerous. You've killed all the other monsters, and then suddenly there's 6 stragglers, but because it's 100% delirious, those 6 stragglers are actually really, really strong. And so you can very easily lose a portal that way in softcore, or lose your character in hardcore because of it. That I will say that I don't really recommend this gameplay style in hardcore, because Delirium causes so many game crashes that you will die to a crash if you do it. But anyway, that's another point. So what you're going to want to do for step 1 is seek out the map at the tier that you want, and then you will start to roll it. Step 2, you're going to roll the map, chasing at least one of Beyond, Nemesis, or the Val prefix. If you hit this combination, so at least one of Beyond, Nemesis, and Val, then and the mod and the item has at least 5 affixes, then go to the next step. If you hit and you've got 4 affixes, then I suggest that you apply the cheapest harvest augment available to just add one more mod to the map. This tends to be cheaper than continually chaos spamming until you get a 5 mod map that has Beyond, Nemesis, or, well, Val is, the Val prefix is much more expensive because it requires a bloodstained fossil to get it. Step 3, if you have the Nemesis mod and it's under 28%, Divine Orb spam it, aiming for at least 28%. And I won't fault you if you decide to Divine Orb going for the perfect 30. That was something I was going to try, except that I ended up hitting Beyond first. Step 4. This is the part where you may need to interact with other players in the Harvest trading Discord, which is an absolute nuisance, I find, but it is the most powerful way to play the game at the moment. It is basically, this Discord is the end game at the moment for crafting. You will need to source a harvest, fracture an item with 5 mods craft. You could also use fracture a prefix on a 3 prefix item, but don't do this because that craft is extraordinarily precious. Do not waste that craft. It is so, so, so valuable to people that are trying to craft merit tier items that they will outbid you. The fracture an item with 5 mods craft, though, that's much cheaper. Now, it's all about luck here, getting the actually succeeding in this craft. So what will happen is that the game will pick one of the 5 or more mods that are on the item at random, and that that mod will be locked onto the item. So let's just assume that, well, this has only got four item mods on it at the moment because it's been rolled since, but let's just assume it had 5. It would have a 1 in 5 chance to hit slaying enemies close together, has 13% chance to attract monsters from beyond, 1 in 5 to hit areas inhabited with humanoids, 1 in 5 to hit players cursed with enfeeble, 1 in 5 to hit monsters poison, and 1 in 5 to hit whatever the last mod was. Now, if it hits beyond, fantastic. If it doesn't, then we haven't invested much in the map as yet. We've invested a tier 15 Elder Influence Foundry Map. We haven't made all of the other major modifications that we're going to make to this map afterwards. So at that point, you can just simply say, okay, no dice, start again, try it all over again. Or alternately, you can sometimes cheese your way out of it with Horizon Orbs. So a quick aside on what Horizon Orbs do to fractured and influence maps. Horizon Orbs make a map forget that it was ever fractured. However, Horizon Orbs do remember influences on the map. Finally, Horizon Orbs can only return to their original type if it's the lowest watchstone count possible for that tile set. So for instance, Foundry Map is 4 watchstone version is tier 15, but no 3 or 2 or 1 or 0 watchstone version exists. That means that you can use any tier 15 map, you can Horizon Orbit into a Foundry. The same is true of Burial Chambers. Any tier 16 map can be horizoned into a Burial Chambers. But if you had a Port map, Port is tier 12 at 3 watchstones and tier 14 at 4 watchstones at the time of recording this video, which is the Ritual League. This may change next league. If you have a tier 14 map, even if it is a Port, and you apply Horizon Orbs to it, you'll never get Port back again. Only a tier 12 map can be Horizon Orbed into a Port. So that can be messy, especially if you wanted to run something like a Shaper Influence tier 14 Port map. So a bad fracture like locking a Reflect mod on a Shaper port map is the end of the line, you need to source another shaper port if it's tier 14. But if it was tier 12, you could basically turn Horizon Orbs into a new base to start over. So that's how you recover from a failed fracture. You've lost your fracture craft, but you haven't lost your base. Step 5. At this point, you're going to want to get the Harvest Craft out of the way. You'll notice that this has a Harvest Craft, does not consume Sextant uses. This enchant is brokenly powerful in conjunction with the Nemesis monster, with the Nemesis mods. So let me just find my Nemesis. Where is it? I think I have one of these, don't I? I think I have a Nemesis 3. Maybe I don't. Is it in my inventory? There it is. You'll see that this watchstone here, this Chromium Valdo's Rest watchstone, has Nemesis monsters drop an additional 3 basic currency items, with 3 uses remaining. So, what that does is it causes every rare monster that has Nemesis mods to drop 3 additional drop anywhere pieces of currency. That is a jackpot sextant roll, but in conjunction with the does not consume sextant uses enchant, you can basically duplicate that roll. It's a 1 in 75 sextants to roll that, so it's not a common sextant mod. It's 4 times rarer than the common ones, and so it's extremely powerful. And this enchant just dominates over all other choices. None of the other enchants come even close to the power level of does not consume sextant uses, so absolutely get that. This is not something you're likely to encounter yourself. It's a pretty rare one. So you will find that with the harvest crafts, that there's a harvest craft that gives you a chance to get various different map enchants. Sextant uses is the rarest one. I believe it's 1 in 20 of those that will give you the sextant uses one, but it's still it's so powerful that you just want to have it on your map. It is very important, absolutely crucial, that you do this before you apply your Delirium reward layers. Otherwise, when you apply this enchant, I believe that all of the Delirium rewards on the map are wiped out. Your next step is going to be the smallest one, and that is going to be to source a 35% quality upgrade for your map. The way that you do this is by leveling in the Betrayal system. You want to level up Hillock to be a 3-star rank, and you want him in the intervention wing. And then you will be able to use his bench when you run his safe house. He doesn't need to be the leader of intervention, he just needs to be a member of it. When you run his safe house, you'll have a crafting bench that you can put your map into, and it will spit it back out at 35% quality. Again, this is essentially duplicated by every fractured fossil that you make, that you use, so it's like having 3 more cartographer's chisels applied to the map every time, then beyond the normal cap. Step 7, apply your chosen Delirium orbs. Do not do this before Step 5. Step 8, roll your maps. You'll need to put a Fractured Fossil into a Resonator, and then you can choose some other ones to lock out some mods that people don't like to run. So to make Players Cannot Regenerate and Players Cannot Leech impossible to roll, a Dense Fossil. That will prevent life mods from rolling. To make Reflect Physical impossible, Metallic Fossil. To make Reflect Elemental impossible, Corroded Fossil. And to add more monsters, and I don't recommend this in the current Ritual League economy, but to add more monsters you can use a Bloodstain Fossil here. Don't use Bloodstains unless they fall under 4 Divine Orbs in price. Step 9, you're going to want to roll your Sextants. Don't skimp here. You can use Elevated Sextants or you can use Awakened Sextants, and really you definitely want one of your Watchstones to have Nemesis 3 or the elevated version Nemesis 4. The elevated version is obviously better, but it costs a lot to roll on average. I think at the moment it's an average of 40 exalts every time you try and roll it, and of course you can get very unlucky and just flat out not get it. So you can go 120 exalts worth of elevated sextants and still not see it. Also, there's a question of the tension between the flexibility of the quest watchstones, where, for instance, if you get a genuinely good roll like Areas Contain Nico that you have no use for, you can just store it aside and then that can be used later. So that's one thing to consider, but then there's the raw power of the region-specific watchstones. I think the region-specific watchstones are better, and I would suggest that you do use them, but it is good to have a few backup watchstones as well. Finally, you want to source your scarabs, run at least gilded scarabs and a full complement of 4 on every map. Experiment with winged scarabs, see if you can make them worth it, but at least be using gilded scarabs in all 4 of your slots. And note that I am saying 4 slots here. You will need to get your 5-way map device first, so you'll need to run a 4-way Domain of Timeless Conflict. Otherwise, it's just not worth your while going up to the level of spending Fractured Fossils. The people who've got their 5-way map device and who are using 4 scarabs, they'll be willing to pay more for Fractured Fossils than you are and be willing to outbid you. Anyways, that's all the steps that went into creating this meme version, this meme map, and also into any other Fractured Fossil base at the moment. The key things to consider, though, in terms of some of the questions you might want to ask yourself: do you want to use the Bloodstained fossils? Just keep an eye on their price tag. Use them when they're worth it. Don't bother when they're as expensive as they are at the current time in Ritual League, but do keep an eye on them because sometimes they become worthwhile. And can you get yourself an Elder or Shaper map that you can use as your base, because that will affect every single duplicate that you make of the map. There is another option as well that's more appropriate for low tier maps, and I will just mention it quickly, and that is the Spores on the Wind here. Maps found in areas have a 10% chance to have an area contains an additional Blight Encounter enchantment mod. This can be really useful if you are running a map that cannot be Shaper or Elder influence because you don't want to run a tier 10 or higher version of the map. Then in that case, you may wish to use Spores on the Wind to source your initial base. So for instance, if you wanted a tower map, what I would suggest you do here, a tier 2 specifically tower map, let's say, then what I would suggest you do is you remove all your watchstones from Lex Proxima, which is where, hang on, tower's in Glenat Cans. Sorry, you remove all of your watchstones from Glenat Cans, keep watchstones in all other octants of the Atlas, allocate Spores on the Wind, and then you want to run low tier Lyra Arthane maps, hoping to get a tier 2 tower drop from one of them. You'll want to make tower your triple favourite map in Glenat Cans, so tower, tower, tower. Triple favourite it, so that any tier 2 map, almost any tier 2 map that you get is a tower, and then just keep going until Spores on the Wind procs, and you get a tower map that has this enchantment modifier on it. So that's your other option there. But ultimately, there's a lot of different things to keep in mind. But ultimately, Fractured Fossil farming is very, very lucrative if your PC can handle it and if your character can. If you've got any comments or questions, fire away below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you have a good one.